Every few years, a product comes along that has the potential to revolutionize the world. Can we even imagine living in a world without rubber, glass, or steel? Back in the 1950s, we developed silicon, which became the backbone of all modern electronics. Around that same time, plastics began to be used in almost everything. Recently, we've seen innovations like carbon fiber, Kevlar, and graphene. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about one of the most exciting materials to come along in decades. And honestly, you won't believe the potential it has. It's stronger than steel, lighter than steel, and get this, it's cheaper to manufacture than steel. It's called Superwood. So, how is it made? Superwood is created through a two-step process. The first step is chemical, and the second step is physical. In the first step, they boil the wood in a solution of sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide. This chemical treatment is similar to the first step in creating the wood pulp used to make paper. It partially removes the lignin and hemicellulose, but importantly, leaves the wood's cellulose largely intact. Once that step is complete, the treated wood is then compressed until its cell walls collapse. The compression continues while the wood is gently heated. The pressure and heat together encourage the formation of chemical bonds between large numbers of hydrogen atoms and neighboring atoms and adjacent nanofibers of cellulose. And wow, does that greatly strengthen the material. After it's gone through that process, it becomes about a fifth the size of the original piece of wood. Also, its resistance to being ripped apart increases by more than 10 times. It becomes 50 times more resistant to compression and almost 20 times stiffer than the original untreated wood. So, what does that all mean in terms of its strength overall? Well, according to the researchers at the University of Maryland who first discovered the process, it's about 2 times stronger than steel. They've even done ballistics tests and were able to stop bullets fired into it when it was stacked like plywood, 5 layers thick. It didn't perform as well as Kevlar, but it's also about 5% the cost of Kevlar. Added to that is that it is about 80% lighter than steel, and it costs about half the cost of steel to manufacture. So I want to pause here for just a moment, and I want to ask what you think. Does this all sound too good to be true? What kind of uses do you see for a product like this? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. Now you may say, hard basis, this is all theoretical and can't really be done at scale, but you have to understand that Superwood is actually not new. In fact, here's an interview that was done with a lead researcher, a guy named Langbing Hu, back in February of 2018. That's over 7 years ago.
We're interested in replacing steel and the carbon fibers by strong wood structures. So they can be lightweight, strong, and low cost.
So the reason I'm talking about this now is because they're actually going to do it. The researchers at the University of Maryland have actually started a company called Inventwood, and they've secured over $50 million in startup capital, including $20 million from the US Department of Energy, and they're going to start manufacturing Superwood this summer. That's really exciting. Now, they haven't gone into a lot of detail on the specific products they're going to manufacture first, but looking at their promotional materials, it looks like they're going to start with durable facades and structural beams, which I think could actually be a great start. If they can build structural beams that are stronger and cheaper than steel, and frankly look better than steel, then they're going to have an immediate market in building construction. So revolutionary products like rubber, plastics, and carbon fiber. And if all this material can do is structural beams, then it wouldn't be all that impressive. But it's really so much more than that. This material opens up all sorts of doors. For example, car manufacturers, they're always trying to save weight on their vehicles by switching from, regular steel to high-strength steel or aluminum alloys or carbon fiber composites. Now, each of those materials has pros and cons, but one thing they all have in common is that they're often expensive and or difficult to manufacture, not to mention supply chains that rely upon foreign governments that may not be all that friendly. Superwood, on the other hand, is relatively simple to manufacture. And one of the great things is that it can actually be molded early in the process to nearly any shape, similar to how car parts are stamped out, and that's in the time where they're compressing the wood. This means that we could see cars manufactured with strong and lightweight superwood bodies. Other things like windmills, skyscrapers, even homes, recreational vehicles, all sorts of things could be manufactured with superwood. You could live in a home that is entirely made of superwood, from the internal structural components to the exterior facade. Another incredible thing about Superwood is that it has a Class A fire rating, which is fire resistant as brick, concrete, and stone. And I could see a material like this is working really well in areas like Southern California, especially as they rebuild from the devastating fires they experienced earlier this year, or even in areas where you'd want an exterior facade that's not only pleasing to the eye, but also remarkably fire resistant. And here's another really fascinating thing. They're also experimenting with making a kind of glass out of wood. Yeah, you heard that right. If you remove all of the lignin from wood, you can actually make the wood transparent. They've been experimenting with combining that transparent wood with polymers similar to plexiglass to create windows made from wood. I think they're still a ways off on that, but that's, again, something incredible that they can do with wood. It kind of boggles the mind, all of the things that you can do with wood. But remember, microchips are just sand or silicon that's been taken through some very specific processes to make it work the way that it does. So why does wood have to be any different? In fact, I made a video a few years ago about a company that was making satellites out of wood. They were using plywood, and the satellites were very small, but you could theoretically build large, strong, and lightweight satellites out of superwood. The possibilities are really endless. It's amazing that a space-age material is coming from something as ordinary and terrestrial as a tree, but that brings up another point. It does come from a tree, after all. And as we know, deforestation can be a really big problem around the world. So, could a material like this lead to increased deforestation? Well, I don't think so, for a few very specific reasons. Now, a lot of the deforestation around the world is not about harvesting trees. In the Brazilian Amazon, for example, they often burn the trees in the rainforest and throw them out because it's not about the trees. It's about the land, specifically, land for cattle to graze on. Today, most tree harvesting, especially in places like Europe and the US and Canada, is done sustainably and can be managed in a way that does not destroy the environment. A couple of other points to consider is that wood stores carbon, meaning that it can take carbon from the atmosphere and lock it into that product. The production of steel and many other materials like that are dirty, and they only release more carbon. They don't sequester anything. Also, a product like this could lead to a stronger domestic logging industry and could revitalize communities and bring back jobs in areas where they've been lost. It's definitely something to watch for. So, you can probably tell that I'm really excited about this product and I think that it has a ton of potential, but here's the thing. They haven't really proved themselves yet. The question is, can they create products that will do what they say they will? Will they be able to manufacture at scale and at a price point that would make a product like this useful? Something that people would actually buy because it's competitive on price. Now is their chance to make it happen. They have the money that they need to get started, and I, for one, really hope that they succeed. But I want to know what you think. Would you use a Superwood beam in your home? What problems do you see with a product like this? What other uses could there be? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. Also, if you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel.